Oh, hey there. Canadian Kyle here. I'm back in Canada, flew here via Hawaii. It was a wonderful trip. Immediately got sick when I got here, so it's been about 2 weeks since I landed. I'm back to feeling good enough to make a video. Purchased a Bamboo Labs P1S, which is busily printing a part of the gold dredge behind me. And since you've all seen the products that I sent out those videos just a few days ago, I'm going to show you how to put it together. So this is going to be a little bit of a random chat about things that I find interesting and mostly about this gold dredge. So we're going to point you over in this direction right here. There we go, a little workbench down there. So when you download the file for this subsurface gold dredge, it's all going to come out in different pieces. Here's the front flare and here's the tail flare. These two components you have to glue this onto. So what's going to happen is you're going to get this and it prints vertically, and then you're going to get this little bottle cap thing which prints like this, and we need to glue the two of these together. So it slots in there, fits pretty tightly, but of course if you jam it in there without glue, how do you take it off? You take one of your specially engineered floats of choice and you thread it on, and you just use that to pop it out. So obviously we don't want them to pop out that easily. We're going to glue this together. Depending on the plastic you use, this is why, you know, it's a 3D file. It's not a complete thing that I'm sending to you in a box. So you get some choice over this, but pick your adhesive. I'm using cyanoacrylate, just CA glue, and it dries quickly. So you're going to take some CA, put it around here, put it in here, stick the two together, and you now have a float mount assembled. So I'm going to do that real quick without the glue, speed up the video. There you go. So we've now assembled this with glue, and this piece is then going to mount on here, and there's a little rib across the top here and a little groove across the bottom here, so they'll fit together and put it exactly in the right location. It can't really move around. Once it's there, it's there. Best practice would be to use a little bit of sandpaper to rough up your surfaces. I don't actually think that's necessary, and you simply take your glue so you know where it goes. If you put the glue on this bottom surface here and then press it on there, you're good. If you really want to be fancy about it, you could draw a little line around here to figure out exactly where it goes on there, and you could glue both sides. But basically glue it, stick it together, hold it for a little bit, let it dry, and same thing with the front flare. There's the same ridge, same piece, and now it's assembled. So next step, I'm going to show you the hose I found, which is going to work really, really nicely with this machine. So I've got 3 hoses in front of me, and I'm going to show you why I picked this one and where you can actually get this hose and what some alternatives are. What I have been using up to this point is this hose. Now it has a very good bend radius like that, but the wall thickness is about twice as thick as this one here. This is from a place in Canada called Greenline Hose and Fittings. There's a place in the industrial park of Calgary where I'm currently located, and you can show up there, you go in and you can purchase this stuff by the foot, and they'll like cut you the length you need and sell it to you. Super convenient. If you're in the United States, I've got some ideas, but I can't be as helpful as just telling you to go to Greenline Hose and Fittings for this. So this stuff here is called G941W, and it's like a fish transfer hose for like really big gold dredges, like the 6-inch size. That heavy duty wall might be an advantage, but it adds up in weight. And so what we have here, this is G941GT-200. The 200 just indicates the size. If you're in the United States, there's a company called Kuriyama Industries, and they sell something called WH-200. Spec for spec, weight per foot and diameter and everything, it looks like the exact same hose. It's the same PVC material, and it is officially sold as Dredge hose. So I can't tell you exactly what the big manufacturers are using, but I believe they're using Kuriyama Industries WH200. Now it's called SH300. They just changed the name to SH for the larger sizes, and it's like more cold resistant material or something. But that's the hose you want to get a hold of in the United States. And maybe Greenline is down in the States too. I'm not actually sure. But here in Canada, if you go to a Greenline Hose and Fittings and you buy a G941 GT-200, this is what you're going to get. And the final option here, this is G1740-200, and it's the same hose, the same thickness of edge, roughly the same diameter and everything. The inside diameter, all these are the same, but this is a polyurethane like wall. And so that polyurethane is supposed to be way more durable. And so when I got a 4-inch dredge a while back, my 4-inch dredge, I decided to go with the polyurethane version, but it has a disadvantage. Typically, a PVC suction hose isn't going to be like this horrible wear item where you're like, man, I wish it was so much more durable. I've only ever seen these things wear out where it's like you're bashing a rock and you poke holes in it and stuff like that. It's not like the actual plastic just sandblasts itself thin enough to, I mean, I'm not a commercial dredger, so I don't know. But here's the thing. If I take this and I bend it, the effort that takes, not a lot of effort, but you know, it's the same effort as I'm holding it. It's the same effort down here, and it just has a memory effect. It always goes right back to where it is. So if you have a really lightweight gold dredge and you want to dredge over here, it's going to push the dredge that way. And it's just always going to want to hold its shape, and it can be a little bit annoying to deal with. Whereas if I take the same length, so that's the same, you know, 1 foot length, and I bend it, it might be a little easier to bend, but now that I'm holding it, it's gotten way easier. And so here, it's like, it's almost no effort to hold now. So originally to bend it takes effort, but then it pops back and it sort of has that memory and it slowly takes its shape. So with this, once you've got it bent and, you know, into that position, it just relaxes into that shape and it's a lot easier to use, which is why I would recommend this stuff. So I've got 6 feet of this hose, roughly 2 meters, and I'm just going to show you sort of what you would need here. And then once I've gone through everything, I'll set the dredge up here and sort of show you how it would work. So first of all, you're going to need a charger for a lithium iron phosphate battery. You can use any deep cycle lead acid battery as well. It's all the same thing. These are just better these days. They used to be really expensive, but now something like this eco-worthy, well, you look at the internet for what the price is, but they're dirt cheap. This 30 amp hour battery should run this bilge pump for about 2 hours. I haven't done a timed test, but based on this power meter, what it's using and amp hour capacity and all that, 2 hour runtime. And this thing is light, like compared to a lead acid battery, very light, definitely packable. You can charge this off a solar panel and a charge controller, and you can charge this with a regular battery charger, but a battery charger that is specific to lithium ion batteries, basically it tops up the very last bit of this battery. So you won't get a full charge out of a regular car charger that's not designed for lithium. So I picked up a 20 amp lithium charger here. It's got the cable and everything came with it, and I think it was like 60 bucks Canadian. So for you Americans, you know, it's very cheap. If I throw out a number and I say, hey, this is a $40 thing I'm selling, it's going to be a lot cheaper in US dollars. But anyways, get a charger for your battery. You do not need the power system watt meter. That's just for my research purposes. In Australia, you'll notice I was using a Seaflow 3,700 gallon per hour bilge pump. I noticed that the 3,000 gallon per hour bilge pumps looked like the same motor, and the 4,700 gallon per hour bilge pumps even looked like the same motor, just with a different casing and a 2-inch hose coming out instead of 1.5 inches. So when I got to Canada, I was going to buy a Seaflow pump, and in Australia, 90 bucks shipped to my door in Australian dollars. In Canada, it was going to be 150. So I was like, maybe I'll look around. I went to vivor.ca. It's where I bought my diesel heater for my garage. They seem to have like a pretty decent, like they'll sort of select, they only sell this one bilge pump. They don't have like 20 of them like Amazon or eBay, but they select something good. I bought it. I was not disappointed. It seems like the exact same thing as the 3700. So I don't know if they just rate it at less to be a little more honest about their ratings, but the stock impeller that I found inside is the same diameter and everything. And my little closed-faced one that fits in here, it fits perfectly, if not slightly better than in the Seaflow. And this shipped to my door. It was on sale. It was like $70. So that's another option. And that's promising that multiple bilge pumps can work depending on where you are in the world and what's available to you. Interesting side fact. I measured this, just plugged straight into this battery through here. So it depends whether how much charge your battery has and stuff. These numbers will vary a little bit for you. But with the stock impeller, just running wide open like this, I just had it in a laundry tub and I'm just spraying water. I got 205 watts running this guy. And then once I hooked up my little hose to it and ran it to the suction nozzle with a 15 mil diameter jet, which it's about 1/2 inch. It's not because it's a 2-inch dredge, it's because that's what matches to this pump based on my previous research. It went down to 165 watts. And so the reason it drops is if you completely were to plug this off, it's just spinning water in a circle that's already spinning. It's not actually like grabbing still water and accelerating it and moving it out. So super inefficient because it's just sitting there spinning water doing nothing, but that's why it drops. But that's with the stock. So this is where it gets interesting. 205 open to 165 through the jet. But when I put my impeller and I just let it, knocked a high performance dredge float over there. My impeller, wide open, only uses 168 watts. So it's actually using less power, like it's doing less work wide open. But once I put it through that jet, it goes up to 175 watts. So through the plumbing, we've gone from 165 to 175 watts. So it's using a tiny bit more, but relative to wide open, it's using a little bit less. Just interesting the way all this stuff works. The whole dredge works. You don't need an impeller. This is completely optional. It just gives you roughly 20% more suction, which surprisingly you don't need with this subsurface setup. There's plenty of suction regardless of what you do. So yeah, you basically have a battery, and what I did here is I got an extension cord. This is a 10 gauge cable. These connections on the end are called XT60 connectors, and that's overkill. A 12 gauge cable would be fine. I got 25 feet. You can just find these like extension cords pre-connected, no soldering to be done. So what you would do is you would get your clamps and clamp it onto your battery. We're just going to ignore this power meter, and you plug it into your extension cord. And then your battery sits on shore, somewhere dry and safe, and you just have this little cord, and depending on how long of a cord you get, let's say you get a 10 or 15 foot long cord, gives you plenty of room to poke around, and on the other end, you just plug it in. So that's running, and when it's time to stop, that's your switch. If you put a little dielectric grease right here on this fitting, no water is going to get in. Like once it's greased, it's just going to be a waterproof connection. And in fresh water, even if you don't have any grease on this, if you plug this in and you put it under water, it's 12 volts. There might be a little bit of a parasitic drain going through here, but you don't actually need a waterproof connection. And this whole extension cord can just be out in the river with you and also act as your on-off switch. So that's just like a simple way you might run this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the battery over there, and we're going to pretend it's on shore, and I'm just going to set up the dredge here and sort of see how that might work. But first, it's time to construct a high-performance dredge float. It's hard work, but somebody's got to do it. All right, so got it set up. Your battery's off on shore. You've got a big extension cord going to your bilge pump, which in this case, the bilge pump is sitting on the bottom of a river somewhere. And in this case, I have 6 feet of hose, which is probably overkill. But you've got plenty of movement. You can, imagine with this guy way over yonder, you have all the movement and you can straddle the hose and suck for gold all you want with your suction nozzle. Of course, I don't have one of the thread-on tips there, but I can do that later. So then if we just slide everything over this way, here's your dredge. Battery's on shore, bilge pump sitting next to you here, suction's happening over there. And with these floats, my idea is that you would use these 500 milliliter bottles. You could use like the 350 milliliter bottles as well. But with one of these on each side back here, that's gonna hold the back at about the right height. So these are going to be sitting about halfway in the water, and this is just barely breaking the surface like at the top here, but that's floating in the water like this. And I'm not entirely sure how it works with the big hose and everything, but you can put a 1 liter pop bottle on each side up here, and it might actually just work out that these are much smaller, more compact, and you really don't need that much flotation because this kind of floats itself. Excuse me. But there it is. You'd have 4 of these floats on here, nice flexible hose, and you are dredging. You could theoretically put that battery in a backpack if you're just in hip waders, taking a knee, and just run you wouldn't even need an extension cord at that point. You could just basically solder an XT60 connector to the end of your bilge pump and just carry the whole thing around like that. And if you wanted a little larger battery, you could set that on shore and of course have the extension cord. You can purchase pre-assembled little pigtails like this. So this is the XT60 connector, and these little guys here, you can actually screw these onto your battery if you don't want to use these clamps that I got here. The same thing applies. You can get little pigtails. Let me just disappear off camera real quick. Show you right here. So if you don't like soldering right to these, it can be a little tricky to solder to these. You can just buy these pigtails and then it's just wire to wire. You can even get butt connectors if you really wanted to, but soldering is probably a little bit better. And all of these things you can buy on eBay, Amazon, and put together a system with a battery that does not need to float, does not need to be waterproofed. You don't need a special Pelican case and all of that. And these batteries are cheap, and there's your system. So to pack it away, of course, you just unscrew your floats. The way I got the idea for using a pop bottle as a float was originally I was going to have them sitting like this and then actually put like a little, like 3D print, like a little half circle like that sort of sandwiches it, and then maybe some rubber bands or like tie a rope or build something that clips on the bottom and holds it. And then you'd have like a bar that sticks out, and then, you know, they'd be sitting like this. But it's just a lot of extra plastic and work when you can just literally thread it on and off. So I think that makes sense. Now, if here, this hose threads into this, there's like 3 of these in the file right now. If I ever make one that fits slightly more precisely to a specific type of hose, I can always just make like a free download section. So you could just download this. There's no need to charge for something like that because it only works with the rest of the system. But this just threads off. So the whole system, you can basically thread the dredge off the hose like that. But if for whatever reason you have to, like there's a universal one of these that doesn't have threads in it, and whatever hose you're using, you can just tape or glue this onto the hose permanently and you still have threads here. So far, I've found these plastic threads are pretty nice and tight, and so long as they're clean when you put them together, they come apart fairly easily. The PETG filament, when you first print, the threads aren't quite as clean as they would be with the ASA or ABS or PLA. And so you kind of just, you thread it on, it gets a little tight, it's a bit sticky, unthread it, just go back and forth, and you basically just, once I find the thread, like once they just keep going back and forth like this and sort of push on a little and twist it and pull on it a little and twist it, you can even pull it apart and take like a little X-Acto knife and be like, oh, there's a little blob of plastic or something. But I've only really had that as an issue with this PETG translucent. That's basically it. The other thing is recovery. So right now, these bands hold everything together, and without a band here, I can just pop this right off. That's miner's moss. Now I have to remove the band. The bottom clips aren't 100% necessary. You can just use it like this, but I put them there because you don't want to risk this thing coming apart if you bang it against a rock or anything like that. And here is your prototype drop riffle. So there's a little arrow telling you which direction this has to go. And basically the way I designed this was it's got dividers so that if it tips side to side a little bit, it's not going to slosh your material across the entire riffle. It's sort of like a Hungarian riffle where it's that 15-degree angle iron going like this, but scaled down. So it's got a little overhang there. And like, I'm going to get into a whole month of just testing various designs. I think this one should work really, really well. And if you use the drop riffle to do a cleanup, you could take it apart and put it in a pan, but with this whole thing assembled and ready to go, you could pretty much just tip it upside down and there's your clean out if you use the drop riffles. This is an optional insert. So it's got holes in the bottom because there's a mat. So you just press through the hole. That's how you unclick this to release it. And what you have here is a plastic printed version of expanded metal and miner's moss. So this is the thin stuff. It's about 8 millimeters thick, or 5/16 inch backed miner's moss. That's what I use in the high banker. And it sort of provides like a soft bottom to your recovery. So if there's more energy, it jiggles deeper. If there's less energy, it jiggles near the top. And it seems to do a really good job of capturing gold. But you can take that or whatever, if you want to make a silicone mat that fits these dimensions, and of course you can trim it to size to fit in here, there's a lip that goes all the way around all 4 sides. So you can press this in and you kind of have to take your fingers and like press it all down underneath that lip, and it actually holds the moss into this little tray or whatever mat you want to experiment with, and there's your tray. You could even run it just like this. Now, I measured the expanded metal that I'm using in the high banker. It's like 5 millimeters tall, and so these are all 5 millimeters tall. But I think the reason expanded works so well isn't that it's diamonds, it's that it's really small riffles. So these riffles go straight across, which I think should make them work better. I have linear dividers, because having individual cells with your expanded is important if it tips side to side. So you've got individual cells, and they are actually downstream tipped a little bit, 15 degrees at the top, leaned like this so rocks will roll over, and there's a little area underneath to stuff to tuck in behind. But this is just another prototype idea. I haven't taken both of these and run them side by side and taken the same material and sucked it through and seen what my recovery rate is. That's going to be a whole big project, but essentially you got a little arrow on the side here so you know which way it's going to pop in. Make sure this goes in the correct direction because it'll go backwards if you're not careful. And you just snap it in and it sort of clips itself into place thanks to the flexibility of the plastic. And there you go. It is now a miner's moss recovery system, which I think should work really well. That is basically why I'm selling this right now as a 3D file, is that at some point in the future, I want to do all of the research and tell you honestly, like, if it doesn't work, I'll let you know. How well does this recover fine gold? How well does this compare to this? And I'm going to do some really interesting tests where I basically just fill one of these trays with like only half length of riffles, and the whole tube has no recovery except for just that. And so I can test like 3 riffles versus the same length. If I make those 3 riffles half the size, then I can fit twice as many. So is it better to have 6 small riffles or 3 big riffles? And then I can vary, like, what about the depth of the riffles? Like the width to depth ratio, does adding an angle actually help? And there's a whole bunch of things that I can actually do in a scientific manner that will get us whatever works best with this sluice. And that's basically where we're going to leave it, is whatever updated profile I come up with, that'll be a free file. And then anyone who's purchased this, you can always just be like, oh yeah, that looks like it's a little bit better than what it came with, so I'll just print that out and off you go. If you do want to go with this, you'll obviously have to find yourself miner's moss. To sell this as a physical product, well, this is what you get. And I haven't given it the proper testing yet. So that's why it's not a physical product yet, along with the fact that I have one 3D printer. So it won't be on the website, but if you would like to purchase this and you're like, okay, I need I don't have a printer, I'm not interested in this, just like sell me one. I'll figure out over the next week, like printer time, filament cost, how many hours it takes me to glue everything together. I'll get you a length of hose cut out, try to figure out what fits in a box and all that kind of stuff. But that's just going to be sort of a side project for now, because I really need to start focusing on building high bankers and setting up the high banker factory here in Calgary while I'm here. Get Chris making high bankers. But yeah, that's what we got going on. I'm hoping in the future I can do a 3-inch version of this, and to really focus in on fine gold, you just have a regular 3-inch version. That's all you'll ever need to capture pretty much all of the gold in like the first section in many places. But if you're going after that really fine stuff, then we can do a section here where one of these is actually a sump. So you'll have like a screen system and a sump and a secondary sluice. And that way, the reason this sluice is only roughly 3 inches wide is because that's how wide it can be while still fitting full height rocks down the middle. I can't shrink this any shorter because you need rocks to pass through. So if I made this twice as wide but half as tall, the riffle material would basically work the same way, but I would have twice as wide of a sluice. So if we take a 3-inch, and that gives us all our suction and it's subsurface like this, so we're able to have like really incredible plumbing efficiency, then all we got to do is slap something like this that's wider and flatter. After screening, say, 1/2 inch minus material through, we can squeeze it quite wide and flat and have a secondary sluice, like maybe one on each side or whatever form factor works, where there's like a sump system to a specific fine gold secondary recovery system, and you can just snap that on or off based on whether you're in a fine gold area or you just want a really compact 3-inch coarse gold dredge. It's one of those things where the internet told me that subsurface sluices will have worse fine gold retention than a regular surface sluice. I have no reason not to believe the internet yet, but the internet also told me that an infinity jet was somehow going to be more efficient than a single jet, or at least that a double jet and a triple jet was more efficient than a single jet. And while there might be something I'm missing about like the way it enters, or like, you know, some converging, diverging rocket nozzle effect that somehow works in subsonic liquids, maybe that's true. But I would see the same effect going from a single, like if I had a double nozzle, I could make it more efficient. If I had a single nozzle, I could make it more efficient. It's basically water goes in this direction, makes other water go in that direction. And for the longest time, I could have sworn that was true, but it actually wasn't. So maybe we'll learn some things as we do more testing along the way here. Nozzles, various things you can screw onto the front of that suction nozzle, which is conveniently fallen off camera. As far as the build is concerned, the same way we glued these little inserts here for the floats, you glue this tip. So this tip prints separately, so the threads print out properly on your printer, and then you glue this together, and then that's your replaceable nozzles screw onto here. Yeah, basically this hose, which I already went over at the beginning, I've got it written down there. So G941GT-200 at any Canadian Greenline hose and fittings. This is definitely the hose to get, and it'll thread into this. I made a special one once I found this hose here in Canada. Get any sort of a LIFE P04 battery, plug it all together. I like the XT60 connectors, and the component that you would purchase from utmostoutdoors.com is essentially this dredge tube. You can print as many sections as you want. It would get awkward at a certain point, but like this is 3 sections long. If for some reason it's not capturing gold to your liking, make it 4 sections long. Play with some random silicone mats that you fit into this tray. Basically, do what you do with it, film it, share it. I'd love to see this in action, and I'd love to see ideas and suggestions just in the comments. I've got some more ideas for different nozzles, and it's just going to be, while a work in progress, it's also ready to go. And I don't think it's going to be too hard for somebody to go out and find their first gram of gold with this thing. So that's all I got for you. Next video might end up doing a little camping trip, say hello to nature, howl at the moon. But then it'll be hard at work building high bankers, and we'll see where it goes from there. Cheers. Thanks for watching, everyone.